The world watches on as the Amazon rainforest burns. Peruvians protest against bad mining policies in the country. And Israel violently represses a Palestinian solidarity protest. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South. I am Doris Polo. Thousands of wildfires in the Brazilian Amazon are raging as environmentalists warn of an impending global disaster if the blaze is not brought under control. The far-right President Jair Bolsonaro has said Brazil lacks the resources to fight the flames. Over 50% of the nearly 73,000 fires in Brazil since January this year have occurred in the Amazon. That's an 80% increase on the same period in 2018. The neoliberal policies of President Bolsonaro have been cited as contributing to the growing problem.
We need to strengthen the Brazilian Institute of Environment and Renewable Natural Resources, strengthen the Chico Mendes Institute for Biodiversity Conservation, promote the development of sustainable projects in the Amazon, strengthen the Forest Code, and especially change this ignorant discourse that deforesting the Amazon brings some kind of benefit to the Brazilian population.
Meanwhile, Brazilian environmental activists have dismissed President Bolsonaro's claims that non-governmental organizations are behind the fires. They said that contrary to his allegations, the fires are a result of deforestation conducted under the government's harmful environmental policies, which has led to an increase in mining, logging, and agricultural activities in the Amazon.
It is immensely absurd Bolsonaro's comments blaming NGOs for Amazon fires. The fires are the consequences of a policy of environmental devastation, of support for agribusiness, of increasing pastures. So we know that it is an absurdity to distract the media.
We need to denounce increasingly that he doesn't represent us. He doesn't know what is happening in the country. He's making use of pain and people's anxiety against the system to preach more hate, more intolerance, more death.
Our correspondent in Sao Paulo, Brian Meir, brings us more.
As thousands of forest fires continue to burn out of control in the Amazon rainforest, far-right President Jair Bolsonaro is trying to create excuses and deflect attention from the issue. The first thing that happened is when a smoke cloud coming from over 1,000 kilometers away from burning forests in the Amazon caused the city of Sao Paulo to turn completely dark at 3 in the afternoon this Monday. His environmental minister tried to say that it wasn't caused by smoke, that this was a freak weather incident. However, satellite photos that scattered across the internet immediately proved that he had been lying to the Brazilian people. So the next thing that President Jair Bolsonaro tried to do is blame international environmental NGOs for causing the forest fires, which he said they were doing in a cynical fashion to try and get more funding. Now, that he presented no evidence for this, and there's never been any evidence presented anywhere in the world that the World Wildlife Federation or that Greenpeace has started forest fires. So this also fell on deaf ears. Meanwhile, protests are beginning to be planned all over Brazil. There are going to be protests in Sao Paulo on Friday and protests in a dozen other cities across the country on Saturday and Sunday against Jair Bolsonaro's attempted genocide against indigenous populations in the Amazon and against his attempted destruction of the Amazon rainforest, which provides 20% of the oxygen to the world.
That was Brian Meir with that report. Now, earlier we were joined in studio by Carmen Yose, Scientific Director at Ecociencia, as well as a member of the Coordination of Indigenous Organizations in the Amazon Basin. She says millions of hectares of forest could be affected by these fires.
In any case, I mean, we are talking about hundreds of thousands of hectares we could be reaching after all is said and the fires can be stopped. Probably millions of hectares, we don't know yet. And the effect of that is terrible. It's simply terrible because on the one hand, we don't have to forget that in any second that there are people living there, indigenous communities living in extensive areas of these forests, the Amazon forests. And as I was saying, also there is a transformation basically that becomes or get in place with different aspects of the structure of the forest changing so much that they will be much more prone to fires in the future. Not to say how many populations of species we can be losing at this point, not to mention the terrible pollution of the airs causing all sorts of health issues for the populations directly affected and farther beyond, as we can see, of the Amazon area itself.
And the fires in the Amazon have also affected more than 70% of Paraguay's protected forests. More than 20,000 hectares of forest inside the Tres Gigantes reservation have been affected, according to authorities, as the situation has become critical for nearby communities. Environmentalist NGO Guira Paraguay said winds of up to 52 kilometers per hour have spread the fires and destroyed an important part of the country's biodiversity. Bolivia's central government, in collaboration with local governments, has launched a massive operation to put out fires that have already consumed hundreds of thousands of hectares near the Brazilian border. More in this report.
Massive wildfires in the Amazon raised an alert for the Bolivian government, which in response created an environmental emergency cabinet. In the town of Robere in eastern Bolivia, firefighting efforts will be aided by the use of a tanker plane.
I have told the finance minister to lease a 747 supertanker to put out the main fires raging in the east of Bolivia.
The supertanker is set to arrive in Bolivia on Thursday and will kick into action early on Friday. The plane, which has a holding capacity of 150,000 liters of water, will be operating over the Brazilian border.
The defense minister has also been ordered to rent 5 smaller planes used for fumigation, which will also be used to put out the fires. We will even acquire 10 if the need arises.
On land, over 1,000 members of the military, along with 500 police officers and firefighters, as well as dozens of volunteers, are battling the massive blaze. Over 30 tanker trucks are also being used to provide water. 25 doctors have also been deployed to provide aid to those who've been affected by smoke blanketing the region.
In the Chiquitania, there are 1,600 hectares of crops. The rest is over 70,000 hectares of grass, as cattle raising is the main productive activity in the region. Therefore, the grassland is what's being burned. So we have decided to purchase 15,000 rolls of livestock food, as each roll is made up of 250 kilos of food.
The firefighting operation includes the distribution of 61,000 veterinary kits and the deployment of nearly 200 veterinarians and agronomists. On top of this, a number of animal shelters will be set up.
After the break, we take a look at the No More Trump protest in the Venezuelan capital. Stay where you are.
Who's moving the chess? What interests motivate the actors behind each event?
Se despliega el tablero.
Uncritical Moves investigates every event from Monday to Friday. Only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Citizens in southern Peruvian cities like El Cusco, Apurimac, Moquegua, Puno, and Arequipa are demonstrating against the bad practices by extractive industries in their regions. They are also demanding changes to the country's mining laws. We have more in this report.
People in the south of the Andean country have joined forces to protest against all the mining projects that affect the environment. First, it was the Las Bamas project, then the Tía María project, and now they demonstrate against Quellaveco and Corredor del Sur.
We are really angry because of the water pollution that is taking place. But as my colleague Miguel said, the only ones to decide if this strike continues or ends is us.
The people who live in Moquegua have decided to give the government 72 hours to address the environmental pollution caused by the Quellaveco project. In the rest of the regions, the main issue is also environmental contamination. Since 1992, the mining laws were designed to benefit the capital city and has allowed extraction without concern for the impact to the environment.
There is a credibility issue with the state. People don't see the state as a neutral entity that controls, regulates, inspects, taxes, and above all, protects the rights of the people.
The people of southern Peru do not believe in signed agreements or the temporary stoppage of projects anymore. They are tired of seeing the destruction of their lands, which has continued for generations.
We are fighting to reach our goal, which is to defend our lands that are so beautiful, lands that feed us. We can eat gold or silver. That's just a lie. We have to eat what the earth provides.
While Martín Vizcarra's regime tries to maintain dialogue with the people, the economic powers keep pressing the government through their associations and political forces to maintain support for the mining industries.
No more Trump demonstrators have gathered in Caracas to sign a document condemning the United States' imperialist aggressions against the Venezuelan people. Our correspondent Luis Tavera was there.
We're in the center of the Venezuelan capital, in Bolivar Square to be precise, where the No More Trump protests are taking place in rejection of the US president. People in countries all around the world have been taking part in the anti-Trump demonstrations. This protest was called by the Venezuelan president, Nicolas Maduro, and signatures are being collected which will be taken to the United Nations. That's how the Venezuelan people will demonstrate their rejection of Washington's policies, including an economic blockade against Venezuela. Those who are signing the document say that it's important to maintain the social protection policies put forward by the Venezuelan government over the last 20 years. People of all ages are signing and saying that support for older people and pensions has been much greater than in previous governments. The signatures will be collected until September 10th, with the president highlighting that more than 1 million people have signed so far.
That was Luis Tavera with that report. Social organizations, trade unions, and progressive political parties are demonstrating across Argentina against the policies of the President Mauricio Macri. Demonstrators are condemning the government's austerity measures, which are causing a growing hunger problem in the country, and are hosting people's kitchens in public spaces, including a massive gathering at the Buenos Aires obelisk. Protesters are also calling for a national strike, a plan to fight against planned salary cuts and better living and working conditions. Our correspondent Edgardo Esteban has the details from Buenos Aires.
A day of protests is taking place across the country, organized by social movements in defense of the most vulnerable parts of Argentine society. The crisis has deepened as a result of the peso's devaluation following the President Mauricio Macri's party's loss in the primary elections earlier this month. Social movements have gathered at the obelisk in Buenos Aires to give up food being cooked here. They're doing this to make the situation more visible and demand an immediate solution. Despite the austerity measures that have been implemented, there haven't been any options for organizations such as soup kitchens or subsidized sectors that work to alleviate the problems caused by a lack of jobs. On August 30th next week, the Minimum Wage Council will be meeting to analyse and discuss salary adjustments. They will also be discussing the difficulties that the most vulnerable are enduring, the majority of whom are without work.
That was Edgardo Esteban with that report. Interpol has issued a red notice for the Colombian FARC Senator Jesus Santrich. Santrich left his security team and disappeared early in July, but there was no indication he doesn't remain committed to the peace agreement signed in 2016. Now, after his disappearance, the FARC released a statement saying that the party is convinced support for the peace agreement is the correct path. However, there were concerns about Santrich's persecution by the reactionary government of President Ivan Duque. At least 160 FARC members have been murdered by right-wing paramilitary forces since the agreement was signed. A red notice is not an international arrest warrant, but rather a request for assistance in locating and extraditing an individual. In other news, the motion to impeach Haiti's President Jovenel Moïse has been rejected. The request for Moïse's indictment was turned down in the parliament after 3 deputies voted for and 53 against, with 5 abstentions. The vote was taken after several delays, which caused the debate to run into the early hours of Thursday. Since February, Haiti has been the scene of massive and deadly protests by demonstrators demanding the resignation of Moïse and his administration amid major corruption allegations against the president. Charcoal production is one of the main drivers of economic activity in Cuba's Guanacaste Peninsula. In the past, they would usually make very little money, but after the Cuban Revolution, their craft was finally recognized. Their lives significantly improved.
After a restless night keeping the charcoal burning, Martial performs his flag-raising ritual at the door of his cabin at 6 o'clock every morning.
I've been working here for about 15 years now, and I always raise my flags. This is the oldest one, and now I was given a new one. I'm still missing a flag from Venezuela, but no one has brought me one yet.
Martial has been making charcoal since he was 18. His father taught him the trade. It might not be a glamorous job, but Martial has a passion for it, and he knows all too well how coal miners lived in Cuba before.
We live like kings now. I have cash to spend. Before I never had any. I feel good. Before they didn't pay, and now they pay me well. I earn 11 or 12,000 pesos a month from the 10 to the 12 tons of charcoal I make.
On the Los Cayuelos farm, we also met up with Jose Peña, who had left masonry behind and has been making charcoal for 12 years now.
This
is a difficult job in every sense, but the most difficult part for me as a charcoal maker is when you need to feed the fire in the furnaces. You have to get up several times throughout the night, 3, 4, even up to 5 times to feed the furnace fire. You can't stay in bed, because if you oversleep, you'll lose the work.
These men stay and make charcoal in the Los Cayuelos farm for months. It's one of the main exports in the territory, and also a way to preserve the forests of Guanacaste.
We are cutting off the branches that a tree doesn't need anymore, those that fell due to a cyclone, those that dried up. So in this way, we facilitate regeneration of the branches. Thanks to this pruning, next year they will produce more grapes. And these grapes feed the pigs, the deer, and all kinds of animals. We are making more or less 7 or 8 furnaces a month here.
In the farm, 2,000 bags of charcoal produced last month are ready to go. This year, the forestry company plans to produce about 1,800 tons of charcoal, but the majority of it for export. And so life for these charcoal makers is not easy, but they remain in good spirits.
Our greatest virtue is that we work too much.
Fabiola López, Telesur, Península de Guanacavives, Pinar del Río, Cuba.
Still to come, the South African president defends himself against corruption allegations. Don't touch that remote.
The Pakistani journalist Tariq Ali examines the mass media influence promoted by imperialism. Get access to the analysis of the socio-economic and political life of the whole South America on our screen and platform in English. A critical place committed to the truth to determine the major events that transformed the world today. On Monday, only on FtS.
Welcome back. Israeli security forces have violently repressed a protest that was staged in solidarity with the thousands of Palestinians detained in Israeli jails. Dozens of protesters gathered to hold a peaceful march near the Ofer prison in the occupied West Bank before heavily armed soldiers descended on them. About 5,500 Palestinian political prisoners, including more than 1,000 children, are currently detained in prisons across Israel.
Our message is to prisoners and the heroes who are on hunger strike. We tell them that we ride beside them, because they are paying the price for the rights of the Palestinian people, as they are spending the time in the Israeli prison. Therefore, they are at the forefront of the confrontation with the occupation.
Sudan's new Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok has been sworn in as leader of the transitional government. This comes after the swearing in of military and civil members of the new Sovereign Council that will run the country for 3 years until an election.
The revolution's deep-rooted slogan, freedom, peace, and justice, will form the program of the transitional period. Allow me to accomplish the central demands. The number one priority is to stop the war and build a permanent peace. We are working to alleviate the suffering of our people in refugee camps. Stopping war will also depend on resolving the dire economic crisis and building a national economy based on productivity and not on blessings and donations.
After having protested for a civilian-led government, people in Sudan celebrated the new transitional government. The body replaces the transitional military council that took charge after former President Omar al-Bashir was ousted from power.
Praise be to God, our country has overcome a huge obstacle and we were able to get out of the corruption we were living in. Thankfully, the new PM and the appointed ministers were sworn in. Hopefully, we will see a new Sudan. I hope the people's ambitions will be realized and the rights of the martyrs preserved.
Shifting gears now, residents in the Iranian port town where the Stena Impero British tanker is being detained are against foreign intervention in the region and have expressed their support for Tehran's adherence to maritime law. The Stena Impero crashed into an Iranian vessel or fishing vessel in the Strait of Hormuz and was subsequently detained on July 19th. The Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif held talks with the ship's owner yesterday about the case. The United States is leading a military mission in the strait, supposedly for security reasons, considerably increasing tensions in the region. Germany refused to take part, frustrating Washington.
Every reasonable mind would decide that it is not workable for the U.S. to come here from the other end of the world to safeguard the safety of the Strait of Hormuz. Therefore, countries like Iran, Iraq, and the Persian Gulf countries would be better to establish their own coalition to make the real security.
The neighborhood of Sura, located in Indian-administered Kashmir, has become the epicenter of resistance against security forces. Thousands are protesting the decision by India to strip Jammu and Kashmir of its semi-autonomous status. Chanting "Freedom for Kashmir" and "India go back," citizens have taken to the streets every night to demand their region's independence. Residents have also built barricades and dug trenches to keep occupying forces at bay, sealing off their neighborhood from the rest of Srinagar.
Many people have been injured, mothers, sisters, and even children. They've come out of their houses to participate in the protests, to ask why our rights were taken away. This came out of the blue. They brought their forces overnight and they turned Jammu and Kashmir into a jail.
Two rival candidates both claimed victory in a regional election in southern Somalia on Thursday. The election was carried out in Jubaland, a semi-autonomous state bordering Kenya, but the federal government in Mogadishu had vowed not to recognize the outcome. Ahmed Madobe prevailed with 56 out of the 74 MPs who casted ballots. However, his rivals also claimed victory. The closely watched regional election had been postponed several times as a result of what observers call a power struggle with Mogadishu, the regional government, and their foreign bankers. And with that, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Doris Polo. Thank you for watching.
Enjoy the best